I once heard a story of a pastor who had a son who was in his teenage years, and it was coming about time for that son to decide what he wanted to do with his life. And yet the pastor could tell that his son really didn't seem to have any direction as to where he wanted to go. And so he came up with an idea of how he could maybe find out where his son's interest lied, so that he could maybe help him to choose a path for his life. And so what he decided to do is he decided to go upstairs into his son's bedroom and lay down 3 objects on his son's nightstand. He put down a Bible, he put down a silver dollar coin, and he put down a bottle of spirits. And so he put that on the table, and then he went and he hid in his son's closet. And he thought to himself, if my son grabs the Bible, then he's going to be a preacher just like me, and ooh, what a great day that would be. If he grabs the silver dollar, well then he's probably going to become a businessman, and that would be all right too. But if he grabs the bottle, he's going to become a drunk. And good Lord help me, that would be worse than waxing my wife's back. I don't know if I could handle it. And so he stayed inside of the closet, and he waited until he heard his son come home, and then he finally heard the door open. He heard his son walk through the hallway, up the stairs, and into the bedroom. And he watched through the little crack as his son went by his bed, threw his books on the bed, and then noticed what was on the nightstand. And he could tell that his son was standing there pondering what was sitting there. And he looked, and finally he made a decision. And so the son picked up the Bible, and he put it under his arm. And then he picked up the silver dollar and he put it in his pocket. And then he picked up the bottle and he took a big drink and walked out of the room. Well, as soon as the son left the room, the pastor crumpled inside of the closet. He put his hands hands over his face, and he began to cry out, "Oh Lord, he's not going to be a pastor. He's not going to be a businessman. He's not even going to be a drunk. My son is going to run for mayor." It's a little awkward with you being here, Kim. Just tell Danny it has nothing to do with him. But what that father believed is that the choices that we make can determine who we will be. And that's what we've been talking about a little bit over the past few weeks, how the choices that we make, they determine who we are, they determine who we will become, they determine what we will do, and most importantly, they determine what will matter in our lives. The choices that we make determine what matter to us, and Jesus was one who talked about this aplenty throughout his ministry, and there's one verse that we looked at a few weeks ago where he really highlights that. And so if you want to read along with me, the underlined words as we go through this, we're going to read something Jesus said about choices. He said, "No servant can serve 2 masters. Either he will what? He will hate the one and he will love the other, or he will be devoted to one," and everybody with me, despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. What Jesus is talking about there is how we have a choice. How we have to make choices in our lives. And one of the choices that we have to choose is between God and between money. Now, does anybody remember the word that Jesus used for money? A Greek word, mammon. And mammon doesn't just mean money, but it means money that has become like a god in our lives. And what Jesus is saying is that in our lives, we got to make a choice. We have to choose which god we want to follow, because we can't follow more than one. So do we want to follow money that acts like a god, or do we want to follow the real, true God? But in the end, we've got to make a choice. We can't serve 2 masters. We can't follow 2 gods. We must choose. Well, the Christmas season is a time of year that can make this choice a very difficult choice. More than any other time of the year, Christmas is a time where we feel like we have to choose. Where we have to choose between God and money. And everything around us is telling us to choose money. Even though we know what the Christmas story is all about, we know the true meaning of Christmas, everything else says money, money, money. Spend, spend, spend. You know, we walk out, and this is a time of year where we feel like we can put our hopes and our joy and everything in money and what we get and what we can buy. It's a time of year where people actually believe that you can tell how much somebody loves you by how much they give you, or that you can truly show somebody love by actually spending money on them. And this is something that has become more and more true over the years. In fact, it's shown through the statistics of just how much we spend at Christmas. I was doing some research and I found that last year, the average person spent around $700 on Christmas gifts. Not all the other stuff, but just Christmas gifts. And this is actually a low number. I saw other numbers that said 800 and above, but we'll go with the low number and assume that the average person spent about $700 on Christmas gifts. And this may ring true for some of us. What I also found, though, is that when you add in the trees and the food and the decorations and the parties and all that other stuff, then at Christmas time, the average person spends around $1,000 on all the Christmas stuff. And then, of course, we live in America where people love to put stuff on credit cards. And so once people have finally paid off all the interest and all the fees that come along with it, the average person can end up spending somewhere around $2,000 on Christmas. $2,000 spent on things that we think will make us happy. And yet what it seems like is the more and more people try this, the more and more people find out it doesn't work. In fact, I shared with you a number last week where the study shows that 45% of people say that they don't even want to celebrate Christmas this year. 45% of people have gotten so sick of all the spending and all the costs and all the stress and all the stuff that whatever joy they used to find in Christmas, doesn't even matter anymore. They just don't want to celebrate it. When I hear a number like this, what it shows me is that we live in a culture that is crying out, that is desperate for something different, for something better, for something more out of Christmas. We live in a culture full of people who want a Christmas that actually fulfills and satisfies them in a real, deep, and true sort of way. A culture of people who are sick of leaving the Christmas season with just empty wallets and empty hearts, but want something that will fulfill them all year and for the rest of their lives and meet the deep needs of their soul. And you know what the crazy thing is, the interesting thing, the ironic thing about it all? Is that that's exactly what Christmas was about in the very beginning. When we look at the original Christmas story, when we look at the birth of Jesus, we see that that's what Christmas was meant to be. That Christmas was meant to change the world, to change lives in a deep and true and real and profound sort of way. And yet somewhere along the line, it seems like we lost perspective. We knew the real meaning. We can see it from a distance, but we can't see the deep, real, true, profound things that God is trying to offer us. Let me give you an example or an illustration of what I'm talking about. Inside of your bulletins, you'll see a little piece of paper that looks like this. I want to invite you to pull this out. And when you look at this little piece of paper, it kind of looks like a blurry picture, maybe with some flowers or something like that on it. But what this piece of paper really is something called a stereogram. And it's a really cool thing. Because beyond this image on the front, if you look closely and you look at it in the right way and you get the right perspective, you can see a much more beautiful 3D image inside of it. How many of you have ever seen these before? They're called magic eyes or something like that. Anybody have the ability to actually see them? So a couple of people. All right, so I want you to hold off and see if you can see it. But for the rest of you who don't know how to do this, what I want to do is I want to teach you how to see it. So what I want to invite you to do is I want to invite you to take this piece of paper and put it right up on your eyes. I mean, like as close to your face as you can get. And then I want to ask you to focus on a central spot on that piece of paper and just fix your eyes on that spot. All right, now slowly I want to invite you to pull that piece of paper away while keeping your eyes fixed on that spot. And as you pull it away, just allow everything else to come into focus. Did anybody see it? Raise your hand if you saw it. What did you see? You saw a heart. Exactly. Now some of you, maybe you didn't get it the first time. Sometimes it takes a while, so I want to invite you to put it close again, fix on that spot, and just slowly pull it away. And some of you may have to try for the rest of the week. I ended up giving Julia a headache. But the whole point of a stereogram is that if you just look at it from afar and you've never seen it before, then you can't really tell what's there. You can't really see the image that's supposed to be there. What you have to do is you have to get up close. You have to get personal with it. You got to get it right up there in your face, and you've got to fixate on it. You've got to focus on it. And as you eventually distance yourself from it, you can see the beauty of what's supposed to be there. And that same sort of thing is what we need to do in order to be able to experience this different, better sort of Christmas. See, we've been so far away from the true meaning of Christmas sometimes. We've been so caught up in the commercialism and what the world offers that we've missed out. We've lost that beautiful picture that God was giving us at the very beginning. But if we can get close to that, if we can focus on it, if we can be right up in it, then we can gain that back. We can gain back that special joy and that special feeling that God was intending for us at Christmas. We can have a Christmas that truly changes our lives and changes the lives of others. And so what I want to do for our time together today is I want us to focus on the real meaning. I want us to go back and I want us to look at some stories from the beginning when it all happened 2,000 years ago. And the thing I want to focus on is I want to focus on the gifts that were given to Jesus, but more importantly, I want to focus on the people who gave them. You see, oftentimes when I ask people, why do you think that we give gifts to each other at Christmas? The most common answer that I get is because the Magi, the wise men, they gave gifts to Jesus. They gave gifts to Jesus, so we give gifts to each other. And I guess that answer makes sense. It's a reasonable answer. And in the end, the Magi are a very central part of this Christmas story, of the birth story of Jesus. We heard their story just a few minutes ago out of Matthew's Gospel. And one of the biggest things we remember about them is that they brought gifts to Jesus. We have songs where we sing about this. But you know, there's much more to the Magi, and there's much more to their gifts that sometimes we overlook. You know, when we think about the Magi, there's actually not a whole lot that we know about them. They only appear in the Bible in this one moment in Scripture. And all we know about them is that they are called Magi and that they came from the East. But beyond that, everything seems to be speculation. People wonder what that term Magi really meant. Some people suggest that they were astrologers who studied the stars. Others believe they were magicians. Others believe they were kings, and that's something we sing about each year. But in the end, what we really know, at the foundation, what we can really rely upon is that they were learned people. That they were learned people who came and traveled from afar to come and meet Jesus. They had studied the prophecies. They'd studied all the teachings. They knew a Messiah was coming, and they knew where he would be. And so they traveled miles and miles to come and see him. And when they came to meet him, they brought him gifts. Does anybody remember what gifts they brought? Come on. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. 3 gifts. Oftentimes, that's why we assume there are 3 Magi, but the Bible never actually distinguishes how many there were, but we do know they brought 3 gifts. Now, for most of us, we don't tend to give a lot of these particular gifts anymore. We do sometimes give gold to each other at Christmas, but in general, Leanne hasn't really put frankincense on her Christmas list recently. So it's not something we know a lot about. But if you were living in Jesus' day, and you heard these words, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, you'd have realized this was something amazing. That these weren't ordinary gifts. These were precious, expensive gifts that they were bringing to Jesus. They were gifts that were only fit for a king. And so what we learn about the Magi through this is not only are they scholars, not only are they learned people, but they are rich. They are wealthy people. And they bring the best thing that they can possibly bring to Jesus. They bring these expensive gifts that come from the heart. But the problem for us is if we stop there. If we only focus on this one group of people who came to visit, to bring gifts to Jesus on that night. You see, somebody else came to visit Jesus once he was born. Can anybody tell me who it was? It was shepherds. And what I want to do is I want to take you back and I want to let you listen to the story of the shepherds. We're just going to have it playing overhead. If you want to close your eyes and kind of imagine the scene, you can do that. But as you listen to this story from Luke's gospel about the shepherds, I want you to listen for what they brought to Jesus, what gift they brought on that night. So let's stop and let's listen together.
Now there were the same country, shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over the flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them. And the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid.
Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger.
And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying,
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
So it was, the angels had gone away from them into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another,
Let us now go to Bethlehem, and see this thing that has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us.
And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. Now when they had seen him, they made widely known the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all those who heard it marveled at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart.
Okay. When we listen to the Christmas story and we hear about the shepherds, one thing to realize and notice about the shepherds is how different they were from the Magi. Whereas the Magi were rich and powerful and influential, they had an audience with King Herod. The shepherds were at the bottom rung of society. Whereas the Magi were wealthy people who lived in houses with ornate decorations, maybe even palaces, the shepherds lived out in the fields. Whereas the Magi could smell of beautiful perfumes like myrrh, the shepherds smelled like sweaty sheep. It's amazing to notice how different these two groups were. No two groups could be any more different than these two, and yet both of them were present after Jesus' birth, and both came bringing gifts from the heart. Now, after listening to that, can anyone tell me what the shepherds brought to Jesus?
The good news.
The good news, okay. Other thoughts? They brought themselves. They brought their presence to Jesus. You know, the shepherds weren't wealthy people. They didn't have lots of expensive gifts to bring. They couldn't bring all sorts of, fancy stuff. And so they brought the only thing they could bring, the best thing that they could bring. They brought themselves. They left their sheep behind in the fields. They made a huge sacrifice, a huge risk by doing that. And then they came so that they could be with Jesus. And they gave the best thing they had. They gave their own presence to him. You see, the sad thing that so often happens is we believe that in order for ourselves to be loved at Christmas, in order to show people that they really matter, in order to really give someone a gift, we have to pay money for it. And yet the amazing thing that the shepherds show us is one of the greatest gifts that we can give to anyone is ourselves. There was one year where my mom, Mother's Day was coming up, and I was trying to figure out the best gift that I could possibly give her. And in the end, I decided that the best thing we could do is just spend a day together. I went to Colonial Williamsburg with her. We didn't spend any money on anything other than maybe lunch. We didn't go into any shops. We didn't do any special tours. We just walked up and down Duke of Gloucester Street and had time together. And living an hour and a half away from my parents, that's the best thing that I could possibly give her that year, and she loved it. You know, so often we trick ourselves into thinking that we have to spend things. We take the easy way out by just buying someone a gift. But what truly shows people love sometimes is the things we do where we give ourselves to them, where we give our time to them, where we give our love and our energy with them. What God is challenging us to do is to spend less money trying to show them how much we love them and actually be with them, truly loving them. And so the challenge for us at Christmas is, how do we fit this into our traditions? How do we fit this into our giving? How do we not only give like Magi, there's a place for that, but how do we also give like shepherds? Maybe for you, that means taking a day off after Christmas and just spending some time with your kids, just devoting the whole day with them. playing with their presents or playing with their toys with them, baking cookies with them, giving yourself to them for a full day. It's so easy to buy love, but what about giving your time to them? Or for others of you, it might be taking a day and going and spending time with your parents who may be older and need help with different things, and devoting yourself to giving them what they need at Christmas, or doing that for a friend or a neighbor, someone else you know. Maybe it's giving a list of things to your spouse that you're going to do for them throughout the year. I remember one year for Christmas, I gave Leanne a little booklet of 12 coupons for a song I would sing to her each month throughout the year. And that was her absolute favorite gift that I gave her that year, and it didn't cost me a penny. But it came from me, and it included me, and that's what mattered. I gave her myself. I gave her what I could give her, the best thing that I could give her. And that's what God is challenging us to do, is to look for ways that we can give of ourselves to one another. To not take the easy way out and just buy something, but spend that time, that energy, that creativity, trying to figure out what we can do to truly show them how much we love them, to give our presence to them. What God is challenging us to do this Christmas, this Advent, and every time throughout the rest of our years that can take us to that different and better place that we want to be at Christmas, is to spend less so that we can give more. To spend less financially so that we can give more personally. To spend less like magi so that we can give more like shepherds. Now, I know for so many of us, this is a foreign thing. I mean, this is just brand new to us. This idea of not buying gifts for people, or not buying this type of gift for somebody, just seems weird. We don't know if they'll want it. We don't know if they'll accept it. We're not sure how it'll all go over. And so what I want to do is I want to finish by giving you 3 little things that you can do that will help you to be able to spend less so that you can give more. To be less like magi, not completely unlike magi, but so that you can be more like shepherds. And so if you're taking notes, here are 3 things that you can write down. 3 ways to spend less. The first thing to do is to pray about spending less. You know, this is a different sort of thing. It's not a normal sort of thing, and it's probably a challenge for a lot of us, this idea of doing Christmas differently, of spending less at Christmas, and we're kind of a little scared about how it all might go over. And one of the best things that we can possibly do, if those are the feelings inside of us, is to pray about it. I don't know how important prayer is to your life, but I know it's something central to everything that I do here at this church and really in my life in general. Every single day of the week, I walk up and down these aisles and pray for our church, pray for our leaders, pray for each and every one of you. And I can't tell you how many times I've prayed something on Monday morning and watched it happen by Thursday afternoon. How God has just answered prayer after prayer in the life of this church. And so I truly believe that if you really want to see some change in yourself and change in Christmas this year, then one of the best things you can do is pray about it. And to help you do that, I've decided to give you something this Christmas. If you've got your connection card and you want to look at the front of it, there's this little box that says, check me out. And it says, please check the box below if you want to receive our Advent prayer devotional. Every day of the week, if you check that little box, we will send you by email a little prayer devotional that will help you to begin to pray. It'll have a little story in it. It'll have some scripture. It'll have an activity for you and your family. And then it'll have a prayer prompt at the end. Something to get you started praying. Something to help you to know what to pray about as you begin to try to pray for God to help you to spend less and experience Christmas differently. And so if you want to receive that, all you have to do is check that box that says sign me up. Now, I know some of you don't have email and you still may want to receive this. And so if you do, just check that box below that says I don't have email. Please connect me with a paper copy and we'll get you that as well. But this is our way to help you to pray and to encourage you as you go through this season, because the first step is to pray about it. The second step, second way to spend less, is to decide what spending less looks like. You know, spending less at Christmas doesn't mean we don't get to spend anything at all. It doesn't mean we have to give up all the presents and the parties and the things that we love. What it means is that we have to decide in our lives for our families, what is enough? What is enough for us? A few years ago, I had the opportunity to be with my nephews as I watched them open up presents on Christmas morning, and this kind of opened my eyes to this. Because I watched as they'd get their first present, and sometimes they'd be totally fascinated by the wrapping paper or the box. Or other times they'd get inside and they'd love the little toy car that came inside of it. And they would love that present in that moment. But then they got another present. And when the next present came and they opened it up, they had a decision to make. Do I like this more or less than the last one I received? And if they liked it more, then the first present got pushed to the side. And then they'd get the next present. And they'd open it up and they'd look at it, and if they liked it less, then they'd push it aside. And it just was one present after the next. And what I realized is that if they'd just gotten 1 or 2 presents at Christmas, that would have been enough. That would have satisfied their hearts and given them plenty of joy. And so the challenge for all of us is to decide what is enough for our family. You know, does it have to be a whole pile of presents next to each person? Does it have to be a room full of stuff from Santa on Christmas morning? Or is something else enough? Maybe a few presents, maybe some more personal gifts that we can give to one another. What is enough in our lives? And once we can figure out what that means, we can spend less and in the end give and do more. And that leads us to the last thing. The final way to spend less is to understand that less is actually more. You know, this different kind of Christmas we're talking about, it doesn't have to be something sad. It doesn't have to be something depressing. It doesn't mean we throw out all the stuff we love about Christmas. But it means we throw out that stuff that didn't work, that stuff that left us feeling empty. And instead, we trade it in for better things. One of the things I mentioned to you a few minutes ago is that there is a place for gifts like the Magi gave, but maybe a little different than we imagine. You see, when the Magi came and gave gifts at Christmas, they gave those gifts to Jesus. So often we assume because they gave gifts to Jesus, somehow we give gifts. But if we truly want to give like Magi, then we give to Jesus. And that's exactly what our Christmas offering is about this year. It's about spending less on ourselves so that we can give more to others. Spending less on things that people don't want so that we can give more to people who are truly in need. And so I pray and I challenge you to consider if God is touching your heart this year to maybe spend less so that you can give more, so that you can truly have a Christmas that changes people's lives. Because that's what Christmas is about. It's about changing our lives. It's about changing the world. It's about bringing peace and hope and joy into this world. So may you walk out of this place and may you see through a different set of eyes. Maybe you look at Christmas differently. May you have a different perspective that helps you to see the true meaning of what this is all about. And may then you celebrate differently. May you give like shepherds as well as like Magi. And may you watch as God transforms lives in your midst. Amen.